But I really feel like if you have a question regarding any trauma, anything, and you want to ask that question, I want to put that out to you tonight. So I'll begin teaching, but just be thinking, I got a question about addiction. I got a question about past memories or PTSD or whatever. And I'm going to teach for a little bit here, and then we'll open it up. I just want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of people, to be able to do that. I also want to share some pretty exciting things. I just met this morning with Hennepin County and a bunch of churches in the Princeton area, and they are wanting to help develop Mission 61 homes over there. So we'll literally be in a square because we have 3 women's homes in Mora and then 7 little dorm apartments. And then we have, here in Cambridge, all kinds of homes and condos and things. And then we have 1 home so far up in the Pease area that is a specific to Teen Challenge graduates, which is kind of cool. So what's going to happen is we'll be spreading that out. Also, Empower Recovery is before the state. I've announced that before, which we're just in waiting now. They things are going slower than normal, but they're looking to be in this building 2 to 3 days a week. And possibly the Wednesday night would be part of their outpatient treatment. So we're kind of working with that. That means LADCs will be in the building, licensed alcohol and drug counselors. And people can actually do outpatient here, which is kind of cool. So classes will be here in that. We are also working with Recovery Cafe, which is a cafe that you establish in a building that, maybe there's certain mornings during the week that people can come in, just have coffee and sit down and talk with peer specialists. Maybe they're feeling stressed or whatever it is, and they can come and they can have that check-in. So other thing that's happening, I'll be announcing this on Sundays and other times, is we're actually partnering with River of Life Church, and it looks like the beginning of August they will be here on Sundays. And coming out of their building, and that means there'll be a Sunday morning service here, and which will be cool because some of our people can't get over to Word of Life, and it's right here, like right here. So that'll be kind of neat. So lots is going on, a lot of establishing and changing up some things. So you can turn your Bibles or your phone or just listen to Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3. And it says, "A voice of one is calling out, clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness, remove the obstacles, make straight and smooth in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised and every mountain and hill be made low. And let the rough ground become a plain, and the rugged places a broad valley, and the glory and majesty and splendor of the Lord will be revealed." If we go back, it literally is saying, he's calling out, clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness. A wilderness usually is a place that spiritually represents our hard times. And everybody's been through a wilderness time, where you're just like, I cannot find my way out of these trees, and there's some big creatures out here that want to eat me kind of thing. And so he wants us to clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness, remove any obstacles that would be blocking his presence from showing up. God shows up wherever he wants to, but he is holy. And when you begin to honor him and we move some things in such a way that it's like it's all about you, God, you will find he will show up in such power that is just wild. And so we had a really awesome service here last night with Calvin Woods. Also want to advertise that. Friday Night Freedom is at Word of Life Ministries and on 95 as you're headed toward Princeton. And so he will be there with Brian at 7 o'clock on that night. Usually that's our prayer and praise night. And so that we'll be doing some of that, won't we? So if we're going to clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness, we remove the obstacles. I think that what happens is if someone says, I'm going into recovery, whether it be I'm recovering from a trauma. Because, you know, if you have a trauma, you're going to act out because of it. You're going to act in and you're going to act out. If you have an addiction, that's part of acting out. But, you know, if you're struggling with temptation of that or trying to say no to that, you're going to act in and you're going to act out. So part of removing obstacles isn't necessarily setting yourself up where, okay, I've decided I'm going to go head to sobriety on these things. I'm going to work through these things. All right, and then you start making a list of everything that's got to go, and you think you can do that in one day. Have you ever done that? Because, you know, one thing could trigger the next thing or whatever, so we just got to get rid of it all. Less is more is a great way to live, where you reduce things down to they're manageable. But, you know, you got to work at that to reduce things down to they're manageable. And what we do is we find out what's the most important things that we should focus on today. What is the most important thing that you need to let go of today, or that you need to incorporate today? If we think, remember, you know, the Bible says to grow line upon line, precept upon precept, command upon command is what that means. So he wants us to come up in those things, and you have detail to detail that gets you to big picture. We want that big picture really bad of being healed or whatever it is, having our minds renewed and all of that. But we still have to do what's in front of us today. And so to clearly think that through, we're removing any obstacles that would be distractions. And a distraction is just, you have the word attraction, right? Attraction draws you in like a magnet. A distraction actually brings an attraction over here that you should go over to. Suddenly that's more attractive over here. That's what creates the distraction. And so we decide what we should be attracted to, right? And we keep our mind on that and don't allow ourselves to be attracted to other things because we've already set our faith a certain way. So removing obstacles is huge, but one of the questions that has come in is, like, I thought we were supposed to get rid of this, that, and the other thing. I thought we were supposed to make a list of this, and I'm like, I don't know who told you all that, but I can tell you, when you're following the Spirit, when you're following God, He'll take you one step at a time. The problem is, if we have success in an area and we look at ourselves as failing in another area, usually people feel such shame in that area and they condemn themselves. And it takes out the productive area that we're in. Because it's like, well, yeah, I'm doing good over here, but the rest of this is screwed up. And then we don't get to feel good about the thing we're doing really well. Have you noticed that? Like, no, actually, there's something going on that's really good. Well, let me harp on all those other things that I'm not doing good. Yeah, but this wasn't here before. Let's take a moment to celebrate that. That's part of recovery. And then you add another good thing to it. Now we got a bigger celebration, you know? And we should have the right to feel good about the one thing without having all of our ducks in a row. The problem is a lot of us have life commands that say, until you're perfect, you don't get to celebrate life. Till you got it all healed, till you got it all together, till you got it all moved around, you just don't get to celebrate. And that's jacked up, right? But if we've been raised in that way, you know, you can be raised in the way a parent comes in to inspect your room and you felt like you did your best. You know, you're in third grade, so a third grade best is a third grade best, right? And it's like, well, this is really good, except for, you know? And so I had to really work when I did foster care with all the 12 kids we had in our home, and that included our own 3, to be able to try to word things differently. Like, I don't know, what do you think of the room? I think it looks pretty good. And they would start looking around and be like, you know what, I probably should pick this up too. Well, that's a great idea. See, it's just a different way. You're saying the same thing, right? But then they get that initiative to go and pick up those socks that they didn't catch or whatever it is. But when we're raised in a way where it's like a condemnation of, you know, you're just never going to reach that mark. Or if you're with a person in a relationship or a parent that, you know, said, this is what I want to see you do. And then you do that, and they move the bar. You're like, I thought it was here. And they're like, oh, no, it's here. And you're like, okay, and you cry about it, and you're mad about it or whatever, but fine, I'll give you that. And then they move it again. And so when that happens, you're in a spot where you don't get to celebrate the thing you did do, the accomplishment you did have. Isn't that interesting? And I think God notices all the stuff we haven't done, but he delights in us. He hovers over us, and he sings over us. But the religious thought behind that is, well, yes, once you've reached that level, he'll do that. Yes, the but. There's always a but, and well, just wait. That'll happen once. And so what that does is it really puts your faith in question, because how do you truly use your faith to move a mountain when you're always in question? I know I'm jacked up in certain areas, but God loves me, so oh well. And I am forgiven, so oh well. And he's not going to point out everything I still need to do all the time. He knows that's too much for us. It's overwhelming. It's condemnatory. He's always got me working on something. He'll point out a new truth, and he waits for me to grow right into that truth. Here, let me help you grow right into that truth. And then guess what? As I grow into it, I feel good about it. And I have permission to feel good about it. This is part of why in addictive behavior, we get afraid to celebrate too many things. It either turns into a wild party, or we just know, like, I'm about to sabotage that. We can't celebrate anything. I can't allow myself to feel good about anything. If I feel good about something, that means I'm having success, and that will freak me out. Lots of people tell me that, like, I am so stressed out. I thought this was going on, and this is happening, or whatever. And they will come right out and say, I know, but I've never lived like this before, and it's freaking me out. Because we have to grow into what success feels like. And you can't be grandiose and be prideful about it, but you're also not a loser. You do get to celebrate right here in the middle where it's balanced. That's what the word sober means, to be well balanced. So we get to celebrate our successes. And that's where testimonies go. Now, have you ever listened to someone's testimony? You don't have to answer this question, but I'm just throwing it out there this way. Have you ever listened to somebody's testimony and known their life besides their testimony? And then you're like, I don't think they should be sharing. But usually what they're sharing is about the success. They're not sharing about what they still got to work on. Right? Now, you can share your testimony in a way like as if you don't have to work on anything else and you've arrived. Well, then that's nauseating. That's pride. But if you're sharing it in like, here's the success, this is where he's brought me to, or whatever, and that should deserve applaud, right? Applaud. And it's like, yes, rock on, let's do this. And then that's an encouragement to keep working that thing and growing and changing. But if you don't get an applaud, you don't get that, an attaboy even, attagirl, because you still have these other areas. They're so messed up. That's hard. That's hard to grow in that. I've sat in classes where I'm the next person up to speak or whatever, and they're going from one person to the next and saying, say your name or whatever. And then it's a little bit of sharing before I get up and speak. And the person shares something good, and they just nail them right in front of everybody about how they still haven't accomplished something. It's like, well, that's pretty counterproductive. It's like, well, now you get to feel good, bad. Right? How many of you know it's very difficult to feel good, bad? You either feel good or you feel bad. Your brain's going to pick one. It's really confusing to try to be good, bad. Now, Romans says that we should give a good estimate of ourselves. So when I look in the mirror, I say one thing in the morning. By noon, I've given a different estimate. I'm like, wow, you're starting to get crabby. You might need something to eat. Or whatever it is. I'm able to be self-aware to a certain degree. I'm sure I need to learn more self-awareness, but you give a good estimate of where you're at That's self-awareness. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I might give another estimate. I'm watching myself. I'm not watching to see if I'm going to perform so well. I'm just watching like, where you at, girl? You know, we got to navigate this. So where you at? And I can feel good about the accomplishments, and I can still be aware that I'm working on things. I'm fully aware that God's working on me and will be for the rest of my life. And when I get there thinking, I don't have to work on anything, I will be changed, so some other work's going to take place. We don't know what it's all about, but we know it isn't just like, oh, that's over. We're going to just to wrap our heads around heaven is going to blow our minds. I'm going to have to grow into that, right? So, we have talked about, how the brain functions a lot here, because I think it's highly important that we understand this is how we're made. And when you work alongside of what God made, you come alongside of what he does, you're working with him. You're not going against the program of your body. He made it to function a certain way and you decided to take it another way. Well, now you're going against the way that he made you. So it's good if you know how your body functions. Good how you know if your brain functions a certain way, and don't try to, derail that, because it's going to make it so much harder for you. Is there anybody who's had a brain question? Because I've had a few this last week where people called and said, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely, concussions are healable, and yeah. So just so that we're hearing as it's recording, you're asking about trauma versus trying to function in life, and sometimes it's difficult because you're trying to go one direction and this is all flared up doing another thing. I just translated into my language there. And so the underside of your brain is your emotional area, right? And it's supposed to be that area that supports your logical thinking on top. And your logical thinking should be like, I'm going to go open that door, let some fresh air in, right? And the underside of your brain goes, yeah, I feel good about that. That's how it's supposed to operate. But what happens is when you're traumatized, you might think, I'm going to go open that door, let some fresh air in. The underside of your brain is like, I don't know if I trust that. Who's out there? Right? And so it'll trigger that emotion that just goes, nah, we ain't opening that door, just leave it. I don't feel good about that. So it can cause it where trauma training in the brain actually leaves those feelings where you just don't feel good about certain things. Now, logically, as you learn truth and the word, you will override those emotions. You're like, no, it's the right thing to do to go open that door and get some fresh air in here. I'm painting something or whatever. I'm going to go do it. And I'm going to override that icky emotion that's going on. Well, then when you do that and you're in here painting, there's this little flutter that happens in your stomach, and in the back of your head, you're like, should I have done that? Are we okay? And that's the subconscious checking in to make sure that you're safe, because the subconscious through the amygdala recorded everything that was trauma, and it believes you're not safe. So its job is to flick out some memories and some things like that will warn you so that you stay safe. Right? So there's like a warning training that ends up happening. So that's one thing. The other thing that happens, we've talked a lot about here, and that is rested in development. Rested in development, some people would call the child within you. Have you heard teaching on the child within you? Whatever trauma took place, especially under the age of 13, causes an arrestment in us when we don't have the information or the permission or the safety to move on from that event. What it does is it causes a glitch in the brain where the little factory in the brain says, okay, I have the memory. That was way too much information. I don't even know how to process this. I'm 6 years old or whatever it is. And so it'll shut that area down from growing emotionally past that point. In fact, it'll only grow 18 to 24 months past the point of the trauma. So let's say you were traumatized at 6 years old. And now, like myself, I'm 57 years old, and I'm going along trying to do life, and something happens and goes in my program, comes back around, because we know that it doesn't, when we build memories, we're not just building another memory and building another memory. It has to, what's happening in the now, even me talking to you, is going through all your past memories and then coming out as a result, and then it settles on, yep, that's what I remember about the night. Right? So if it has to go through past all your memories starting in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, if it has to do that, it's also grabbing a hold of anything in that memory bank that has been unresolved regarding that subject. And if it triggers one of the memories that you don't have closure on, you don't remember it, you relive it. So there's a big difference between reliving a memory and, just go, oh man, I remember I fell off my bike. I just remembered. I actually have no physical feeling in my body. I don't have any sensations about it. I just fell off my bike. Not that big a deal. But if all of a sudden you find yourself going, oh, that's when I fell off my bike, and you see the blood and it's there and you're breathing, you are in the memory now. See, that's trauma training. You're stuck in the memory. Well, wherever the age was that you recorded it at, if it didn't get resolved, when you relive it, you are that age group. That's what makes us feel so vulnerable. Like, I'm a CEO of a couple of different companies, right? Mission 61 is one of it. And I've done a lot of things over the years, so you think, well, she never suffers with feeling like a child. Well, it's the craziest thing. You go into a business thing and it triggers the child within you. Suddenly, I'm not 57 years old. If that happens to me, I might be 6. But you have to keep pretending that you're 57. You're like, yeah, okay, so you're giving answers. But inside, your insides are like, I'm 6 years old. I don't want them to find out I feel this way. I don't want them to find out that I feel this flawed or defective, because usually that's what's attached to any form of trauma. There's that feeling in the inside. So then we begin the conflict between your adult you and your younger you. And a lot of times we will resent that happening. I hate when my younger you shows up. My younger me shows up, makes me feel so vulnerable, so dumb, so off the wall. That's when I cry the most. That's when I have to leave a room because I'm feeling irrational or whatever it is. And I say no when I really want to say yes to many things, or yes when I really want to say no. So I don't want that younger part that hasn't been resolved to ever show up. So part of addiction is like, you keep showing up, I'm going to get you drunk. Right? I'll just shut you down. I will meth your little head out, so knock it off. You know what I mean? And as soon as you start to feel that trauma, that's the temptation to go use, because you're not shutting down your most mature self. You're shutting down the part of you that hasn't grown. And you can talk to that part and say, stop it, don't, and all that kind of stuff. But the emotion of it, when it's triggered, it still stays there, and you're actually reliving the trauma. You're reliving the sensation of the trauma. So that's why we'll go get drunk or do whatever, smoke some pot, and we're like, that ought to shut that little guy up for a while. I feel pretty good now. I can go out and work on the car or whatever, and really, that's not how we should be treating that side of us. We should be treating that side of us with compassion and new knowledge. And you take your adult self and you parent the younger you. That's what we do to control ourselves, don't we? We're like, okay, you're going to do that. Then this is what's going to happen, right? And no, we're not going out drinking and we're not going to do this. We're going to grow now. Okay, honey? That's what we're going to do. We're going to grow. And instead, many times we feel extremely embarrassed about our younger self, because that's when we do things or have responses that it's like, why did I say that? Or why did I act that way? I don't like it. It's so embarrassing. And we really don't want people knowing that we have various areas, that we might be 4 years old in one area and 16 in another. Somebody triggers that area and the memories come up. We don't act our age group. Suddenly we're the party animal. We're doing wild things. We're not thinking about our kids. We don't care. We're just, we're out there because that part of us got triggered. And if you're triggered especially at like a 1-year-old, the younger you are in your emotional state, the more attention needs to be right here. Because a newborn baby can't take care of itself, right? So everything's about that baby. A 7-year-old might be that kid who says, look at me, I'm on the swing, look at me. And sometimes that's what we do as adults. We'll be very adult in one area, but we'll be like, look at me. The way we'll dress or what we do with our vehicles and things like that. It's really because we want to be observed because we didn't get that when we were a kid. Do you understand? So that's how it ends up going. So what happens, long story to get around to this, is we can actually feel what's called fragmented. To have a fragment means like, I'm trying to move this way, but this part of my personality keeps going over here. And so if it's really strong, you'll actually feel like you have more than one personality. And have you ever seen that about yourself? Where you're like, even how you dress changes for different events or different things, because you'll flip into that, this is who I am, and then back over here, no, this is who I am. And it's a changing of the hats a lot. And a fragmented personality can be mistaken for schizophrenia, when true schizophrenia is a chemical imbalance in the brain. And so you'll know if you have that. The beginning stages of that, though, way back, is fragmentation. So I say that because if you're going to try to overcome a trauma and you're feeling your most successful self, especially guys. I mean, we're all kings and priests, right? That's what the Bible wants us to be, to rule, right? But it's even more so a man's spot to be like, yeah, I'm going to rule. But it's really difficult to feel that when something gets triggered and makes you feel like you're 4. Right? Because why am I still back in that? Why am I still questioning myself? Why do I still feel that volatile? Why do I feel like a little kid right now? And I got to really practice so nobody can seize that little kid part of me. Well, you're not. It's just that emotional base got triggered, and there's some things that need to be brought to closure. Some things in your story. So everything's in your story. Everyone has a story, and everyone's story has the right to be heard. That's the first part of getting to safety and working through anything, is to make sure that your story's heard. Well, do we get on a mic and share your story with everybody? At some point, some people do. But when you're just starting in recovery from any form of trauma, you got to find that right person or that safe group to be able to share parts of you and make sure you get that story out. Because once you hear yourself telling the story, you're like, is that the real story? You ever try to write your testimony out? And you're like, oh, I'll just put it together. I'll just write it out. And if you've never shared your story, it'll be like, okay, no. You throw that piece of paper away. You're like, where do I start? Do I start? It doesn't just flow. If it doesn't just flow for you to put it on paper, it also means it's not flowing up here. It's fragmented to this, to that. And okay, this is my adult self, but then I remember this when I was 3, and we have all these things. And so now you're going to put this sequential story together, and it's hard because it's all jumbled back here. So it's a really cool thing to write out your testimony, because the first time you do it, you'll get aspects of your story. Second time you share it, it goes deeper. And then you'll start remembering, no, wait, this actually came before that. I always thought this happened first, but now I've figured out this actually came before that. And that's important because sequential thinking brains are the brains that go 2 + 2 actually equals 4. And there's a piece that comes with that. When you do something like that, you can walk away from that problem and be like, solved. Don't have to think about it. But if it's not learned to be sequential in that thinking and it's fragmented here and there, and you're trying to put your life together, it's very hard to grab a hold of anything and bring it to resolve because it's over here, it's over there, it's over here. So writing out your testimony, telling your testimony, there's always a test with a testimony, right? You went through a test. How many of you are old enough to like that screaming sound? This is a test of the emergency broadcasting system. Remember that? Well, it's a different kind of test you go through in order to get a testimony. And so there's something about being able to share that sequentially. I work with quite a few young people that in counseling that, and sometimes adults do this too, but if you had something traumatic happen, or it was traumatic to you at least, and I say what happened, many times they'll take it way over the top because that's how it felt to them. And that's why I don't take, if there's an argument or there's something going on and I'm in the middle solving that, I never take whatever's being shared at face value because it's over the top emotion because that's how the person feels. So when they share the story, what I do is I'm like, okay, all right. And then in my mind, I cut that story in half. And I say, if only half of that was true, what's the degree of help that this person needs, right? And then the other thing that I do is work the person back to put different adjectives to what's happened. Does that adjective really fit this situation? Like I was outside and this guy just drove by and I saw how he looked at me and I knew exactly what that meant. And I was telling you I needed to run and I needed to run fast and I had to tell somebody. So I called the police and I know that's a dumb idea. First we're talking fast, we're jumping all over and it's way out of proportion for what's happened. So I have to cut the story in half and go, yes, there's anxiety, but that's not really anyone else looking in. That isn't actually what happened. It wasn't to that degree. So sometimes we have to retrain our brain to actuate things like this is what's actual. This was the level it really was. I know I felt at this level, or I felt nothing at all when I should have felt something. But here's what actually happened. So sometimes when we're sharing our testimony, the little kid inside of us felt it way bigger because when you're a kid, it affects you. You don't have the programming to process this stuff. So it'll be way over the top because that is actually what you're feeling. Where an adult looking in, hearing the story as you're sharing your childhood story might be just like, oh, but you're not feeling, oh, you're feeling, and that's what happened. Because it's extra big. And after a while, the brain, after sharing your story and finding healing, will actuate that and go, yeah, that was really painful. And sometimes I still cry over it. But this is what happened, and this is where I'm going now. This is where God's healed me. See, it'll rein it back in. So a lot of people will say drama llama, Oh, there's so much drama at my workplace. There's so much drama. Well, what causes drama? It's an overreaction to the present thing. It's taking the problem and blowing it up bigger than it's like, actually, that's not unsolvable. Maybe we could have used different verbiage when we talked to that person. Could have had better verbal judo, and none of it would have even happened. But it will feel like it's way over the top. Does that make sense? So the traumas, going back to your question, the traumas, when we have felt them, especially as a kid, they're housed in us with the same feeling that we recorded them with, right? And so a 4-year-old's going to have an even bigger feeling about that. That doesn't mean it shouldn't hurt to an adult. It's just your reaction to it when that part gets triggered is going to be way bigger. It can keep you home from work. Something gets triggered, you're like sick to your stomach. You just feel, and I got a headache, and and it happened 10 years ago. It happened 20 years ago. Why is it having such a great effect now? Because that part of the brain still needs to be healed. And it needs a reality check that we are in the now. But even when you give it that reality check, this child within us has to grow into that. So it takes time. And as adults, how many of us, when we want our kids to do something, we don't really want to wait on them. Like, get it done, you know? And there's consequences and everything. And that's what we do with ourselves. Like, grow up. You know, you heard those terms, or you have an older sibling telling a younger one, I wish you'd just grow up. And growing up, or the word mature, has been used in such a negative fashion. Like, oh, you're so immature. You know, that was the big thing for a long time, where people would announce to other people they're so immature. So to think that I would have a part of me that's younger than my age group, that's disgusting. See, that's our training many times. Rather than saying, well, you know what? That little kid didn't get the memo. They didn't get the hug. They didn't get the peace in the home. That part of me did not get the memo on how to bond. Sorry, I didn't get that memo. Right? So many times it's lack of information that happens through the trauma. Now we're in our adult state saying, you know what, that was wrong. Okay, that was wrong. So what are you going to do differently? I don't know, I didn't get the memo. So we walk around with the it's wrong in us, but we don't walk around with the new information that says, this is how I'm doing it differently. We have to find that information to replace the old information. And then invite the child within us to come on over to this. This is where it's safe. And arrested development is something that, you know, you can identify really young in a certain area and have PTSD in that area and all kinds of different things surrounded it, and a year later have grown and you're in your age group just by giving it correct information, that part of your brain. That's why Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He's the way, the truth, and the life. No man can come to the Father except by him. And we feel that separation between us and God wherever we've sinned or people have sinned against us. There's a feeling of separation. Now, you're forgiven and you're under the blood of Jesus. There is no separation. But your brain will send to the body this thought, no, we're separated. See how screwed up I am in this area? He only loves me over here because I'm messed up over here. And it really messes with our head. So moving through trauma is identifying that younger area. Where did the trauma come from? How is it set up within us? What information? Where do we go to get information? You don't go to the same information to get the new information. You got to run with some big dogs. You got to go with the truth of the word, which is the absolute big dog, right? Because that is Jesus. And that truth will go in you and give you a reality check, which then you can turn and say to the child within you, actually, honey, this is where we're going. I mean, you could throw a fit about it if you want, but we're going this way, right? That's what happens with our immature side. But to begin with, when you go to deal with those traumas, you're touching your core pains. Nobody wants to do that. Because you touch those core pains, that's the area of you that can bring about crying or feeling anger and all that. And you're like, I just want a happy day. I don't want to be messing in that. Well, you touch it, stuff's going to come out. And the rule is the way that it works, if it went in painful, it never comes out pretty. It didn't go in pretty, so it's not coming out pretty. Even when God heals people, when I've been healed of different things, I mean, it just like came out. I'm just like, right? Then I feel better. But I didn't feel better when it was coming out. You know, I'm just getting this emotion out. I'm getting this feeling out. And I'm getting the reality check that tells me where I'm going. Is there another question regarding anything? Yeah. The trauma comes back? Mm-hmm. So that happens to almost everybody where you're like, I was done with this. Why would this reoccur? Sometimes there's levels of knowledge that we have to get. We got just enough to give a piece in that, and then we start working in other areas. And then something will trigger that and say, you still don't have the right information here. And we have to go back and revisit it. Sometimes it's the pathways in your brain that have been touched by a certain phrase or a certain thing you might be going through. Like, for instance, you can be just doing really fine, and you were traumatized right before Christmas, but all summer long, you're doing fine. Took it to Jesus. You are healed. You're not even thinking about it. But somehow, whenever the trauma took place before Christmas, as you get to October, you're starting to get agitated and you can't figure out why. The temptations become greater. It's like, what is the problem? I don't know. Maybe it's cloudy outside. And we'll have all these terms of why. But your subconscious is already saying that's that time of year. And sometimes it'll bring it back around just for that reason. Just for that reason. We've had so many fosters in our home that were heavily traumatized at a certain time of year. I, for a long time, had, if my parents were going to argue, it started probably September. That was the intensity of it because deer hunting was coming. And they argued a lot about deer hunting. So when people say they go hunting, I just had this I couldn't figure out why when you get to that time of year, there's this edgy. And I started filtering, what my husband's saying differently. And I'm looking around and I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? And stuff like that. Well, because the whole family was fighting at that time. Right? And as soon as deer hunting would pass, it would pass. And we're on to other things. Suddenly we're happy and we don't even know why. Well, traumas do that. So sometimes you'll think I battle being inadequate. I felt that and I felt like I settled it and I feel pretty good about myself. Okay? All right. So you did gain ground, but go to try to do something new that you've never done before. Now those neurons are going to say, are you sure about that? Because you're just going to go do this? What are you thinking? Stay back here where it's safe. And it'll rile up the whole questioning again because your subconscious will bring up the files to remind you of how you were traumatized on purpose so that it prevents you from getting hurt again. Well, how many of us have been traumatized in all kinds of different areas? We would be doing nothing if we went along with our subconscious. Be like, just stay still, don't move. And then after a while, be like, are we allowed to breathe? Because I'm not sure that's going to go well. And it'll bring up the facts. It'll grab all those things. And if you don't remember the memory, it doesn't necessarily matter. You will get the sensation. Suddenly you'll have a sensation in your body or whatever because your brain is reliving something. It's reliving it. And you'll be like, I don't know why I feel like crying. It's so weird. I'm just crying about everything. I don't know why I'm so angry or whatever. And it might be the time of year when something took place. A death in a family, especially if it's a child or something like that, a spouse. Your subconscious already knows 6 months ahead of that's coming. So it's already making plans of adjustment and how you need to protect yourself. And it's coming close to the date. Remember, last year is when they passed. And so we're coming, and it's almost the grieving time. And it'll get you all set up to feel really intense about that situation. And we'll do that, and we'll work through some of the grief, and we'll think, got it. We move past that date. Okay, I just feel like I'm being healed. And the next year it happens again. Why does it always reoccur? Well, there's more reality checks that are needed. There's more letting go that are needed. There's all kinds of different reasons that'll take place. And sometimes it's just something triggers in your mind, and it's like, that doesn't mean I'm not healed. I just had a memory. That's all. I just had a memory. I'm healed of that. And I'll cry about it even, but I'm moving on. I'm going back to the thing I already know. That's why our T-shirts, right? Once you know, you can't not know. The thing you now know will pull you out of it. You might relive it for a second, but it will pull you out of it because now you know. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Yeah.
Because, I have a really hard time with that.
Yeah.
I'm really scared of things just staying good. And right now, I'm emotional because it's really good.
And it's been good for a while, right? So how terrifying is that? I mean, it doesn't make sense in the brain because success should feel good. You should be able to live in that. But part of what trauma does is cause all or nothing thinking. And so we'll be over here, I'm nothing, I'm so stupid, I'm whatever. And then all of a sudden we start having success and we're in the middle zone. We're not way over here. We're not a loser, but we're not a superhero. And we'll sit in that middle zone. It's like, this is so good. Praise God. He's done so much for me. And the temptation is, and we know this about ourselves, is to go grandiose, right? I hope I don't leave this zone and just think I'm a superhero. There's something like where then I'll take on more jobs and I'll do the thing that I said I wasn't going to do. And I start, I'm so healthy now and all that. And we'll sabotage it when we should have stayed in the middle zone. But that middle zone is not an area we're used to living in because we're either a loser or a superhero. That's what trauma tells you. It's either you're grandiose and in pride and just, I don't need any of you. I'm going to do this life. I'll do my own thing. Don't tell me what to do. And then you come off of that and you're like, I'm just a loser. Whatever happens, happens. So then God brings us to that middle point where it's just like, I'm okay in him. And we get nervous because it's like, I'm okay in him, right? Right? Are you sure I'm okay in him? And then we can get prideful and come up. And that's usually when we start to pendulum swing way over is when we'll face plant. And then we're back to being a loser in our minds. And we hate that sensation. Like saying, I've been a year free of meth. All right, I'm in the middle zone. This is really good. And all you have to do is just give an inch to that pride that moves us over into grandiose thinking, and you're setting yourself up to face plant. And you fall off that cliff, and now it's like, doesn't even pay to try. I'm just going to go out and use till I die kind of thing. And that's what a lot of people do because it's hard to stay in that middle zone. What's that, the loser side? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like I'm scared, I don't get prideful. I don't want to go that way,
Yeah.
I'm in the middle where I just self-sabotage and I'll become the loser before something.
So I'd be investigating in your story, I'd be looking for, why do I believe that I don't deserve this? I don't deserve to feel good about something. I don't deserve to have things. I don't deserve to be smiling and have a good day. I mean, do I even deserve that? I would be looking into your story, what or who told you that you don't deserve that? Right? And that's where I would investigate because you'll find a core of something right in that because that's a lie from the pit of hell. Isn't it? So some people will say, I went to Valley Fair and I having a sober day with friends. We were all laughing and everything. And they get off that, adrenaline and all that. And they're walking around and they go get something to drink. And then they're standing there like, should I have done this? Like, this is okay, right? A lot of people have that. It's like, maybe I shouldn't have spent that money on this. I shouldn't have probably been here. I got to make sure that I stay in line. And usually it's attached to a form of punishment. Now, the Bible says fear brings with it the thought of terror. But when you look that up, it means punishment. Like something's coming. I'm going to get punished for enjoying myself. It's as soon as it comes back around and be like, why did I let my emotions trust, is what we're really saying. I trusted that fun day. And then when I got home, I got something in the mail that said, you still owe this much, or your probation officer docked this, or whatever it is. And it's like, then it'll connect it to the fun time you had. It's like, see, I wasn't supposed to have any fun. See, I told you, I should have been home thinking about how dumb I am. And then at least I would have kept myself in order. But I'm serious, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? And that's what makes you feel safe. As long as you punish yourself and keep yourself down, then you will be safe. So what you're looking for is some form of safety. And punishment's not what cuts it. right? So if you're going to sabotage, a lot of times you're actually punishing yourself by taking things away from yourself. Like, oh, now I see we're going to keep you in order. I think we're going to quit that job because you really don't deserve to have those things you were looking to buy. Now, you are out of control. See, and it'll make you sabotage it, and then you'll actually feel better because you'll come off of that and you'll be like, oh, okay, so I'm still okay. But it was a punishment. Because addictive behavior is trauma looking for, I need a treat to make me feel better, and I want to feel better now, so I have this coming, I should have this. Or, it's I'm going to punish me because I can't stand me. I'm going to go out and hurt me right now. That'll help. If someone else hurts you, think about this. This is the kind of reasoning we end up thinking. Someone hurt me and that I have about had it, so I'm going to go hurt myself. You're already hurt because they hurt you. I know, but it wasn't enough. I'm going to go out and get high. It's going to ruin my money. I'm going to ruin my body. So there, like a bunch of people are going to come and be like, no, don't do it. Change your mind. And you're like, no, fine, I'm doing it anyway. It's a really little kid way of thinking. So what happened is we wounded our younger self, and it trumped the top part of our brain where our older self is thinking, and suddenly it sets adult thinking behind. And it's like, fine then, if you're not going to play with me, then I'm not playing with you ever. And then we'll use big terms. And then if you can't even do that rationally. It's going to be, well, let's just do the whole bag, right? Because if we're going to punish, we're going to do the whole thing. I might die tonight. We don't know. And like people are going to go to the funeral and be like, sorry about that, right? Sorry I heard you. They're not coming and saying that. So, but it's a little kid's way of thinking that you hurt me, I will hurt myself. Makes so much sense. Not. We've had kids in preschool that I ran, and I would see that even in kids sometimes. Like they were frustrated and they didn't know how to communicate. They're at that age where they have enough words to be dangerous, but not enough to know. And they're trying to get something across to another kid or whatever, and the child doesn't play with them. And instead of trying to figure out, well, how could I make this happen in a positive way, they just start hitting themselves in the head. Taking a toy and just hitting themselves. You're like, that's just going to attract a lot of kids to be like, yeah, you're the guy I want to play with. But it makes sense to the child because a childlike way of thinking, if you hurt me, then I'm going to hurt me. So there. And or if you have that training that says, no, I can't hurt another person when they hurt me. I'm just not made like that. But I can hurt me. Right? So there's something there with punishment. Fear brings with it the thought of torment or terror is one version. And what that means is the thought of punishment. If you're afraid you're not going to be safe, there needs to be some kind of punitive action. Then you'll know you're safe. It's like negative attention. Instead of being able to sit in something that's really unsafe and feel safe inside anyway. I feel safe. I'm all right. I know there's stuff happening in the world or whatever, but I'm okay within me. And I don't need to be punished to keep my act together. So then the other side of that pendulum is like, fine then, I don't want to be a loser. So, and I hate this middle zone where you have to, because the word sobriety or sober actually doesn't mean to be without a drug or substance or whatever your addiction is. It means to be well balanced. So your balancing factor is in the middle, and that's where Christ is. Christ in us, the hope of glory. So what happens is I agree I'm not a loser, but man, I want to be the life of the party. I want to be that person who everyone's paying attention to. I miss that feeling of like being the guy walking in with all the drugs or whatever, because when I was little, nobody noticed me. But man, do they notice me over here. And I'm known at that bar, and I'm known over here. And how many chicks or how many guys did I sleep with? That's like a grandiose, like, woo, we're over here, right? We're way away from the middle zone. And so that, it takes Christ to keep us in the middle. And I always, some of you were here when I used the plane illustration. My husband flies the small little Cessnas, and could you feel it when you get up there, because they're like 2-seaters or 4-seaters. If you moved, any turbulence, you're like, it didn't seem to bother him, but and I had to keep looking out so I would see something above the clouds or whatever to have that happen. But it's interesting. Life should move with some turbulence. We're in this world. We're not of it, but we're in this world flying through it. So you're going to feel the turbulence. It's just when we handle it in a way where we go, whew, or whew, loser, superhero. Right? If we do that, you fly a plane like this, it's going to go round and round, right? It's going to do this. We call it spiraling down. And so sometimes we'll notice a friend or somebody when they're spiraling down. You're like, I've seen this before with them. They went grandiose and they're plane tipped, right? It'd be like this. And now I can see their life is starting to spiral down. Very hard to save a plane when it's spiraling down. They don't really have a lot of action, like, go get that, you might be able to save other ones when they're flying, but once it's doing this and it's whipping, it's very hard to grab a hold of that. And the same thing, when you go into loser mode, you're out of balance. To be well balanced is what sober means. And that balancing is that pivotal point that knows how to work with the turbulence. So punishment is that. It's whoof, right? Or constant reward is that. So that's that grandiose. We're really going to be over here rewarding everything. I deserve everything. I want to be noticed. I want the dopamine rush to the max. And we're over here like, I don't have any dopamine. Nobody cares, right? And that's my life. So, and if I try to succeed, other people will punish me if I don't punish myself first, so I might as well do something. Get it over with. But to stay in that middle zone, everybody's been touched by sin. We either participated in it or someone did it to us. So it isn't like this class is for the addicts, like sometimes people will say. This class is for the world. Because we've all been touched by sin, and we're all flying our planes a little funky. And there's a lot of spiraling down going on, whether there's a drug involved or not. A lot of punishment and a lot of grandiose behavior. Any other questions? I'll be doing this every once in a while, instead of teaching on a subject. I want to make sure that if there's something been on your mind that we can nail it. You have one? Yes. What was your drug of choice?
Meth and pot.
Yeah. So, first of all, they contradict each other, right? Meth is that, and then you got the downer. And a lot of times that was what people will do. They'll go grandiose, and then they'll, let me calm that down a little bit. Where's the pot? Where's the alcohol or something to bring that down? So whenever you do something opposite in the brain, that's like trying to drive a car 2 different ways at the same time. I mean, it's not going to work. So your brain can't even interpret that message. Like, what are we doing? And so it can't make the regular adjustments. So what happens is when we go high, especially, we take our brain past the epinephrine point that it should ever feel, because that's basically your adrenals. And there's 2 little glands that sit on your kidneys. And those 2 little glands are just tiny. Can make a grandma lift a car off for her grandson. You know what I mean? And so we're messing with those. Those are only meant for when you're attacked or a bear jumps out in front of you. We're not supposed to be living on adrenaline, contrary to all the stuff we can buy at the stores that jack our adrenaline up. So when that happens, it like shorts the fuses in the brain, and then you go into blackout mode. A lot of times people will have that in the opposite if they drink alcohol, and all of a sudden the alcohol crosses the blood-brain barrier, shuts down. I mean, they are shut down. They could beat somebody up or whatever, and they don't remember a thing. And then the next day they wake up in the jail, and they're like, what happened? And they honestly don't remember, which anyone seeing them would be like, you remember. You're just being a jerk. Nope, blackout is real. You can go into that high of an epinephrine rush, like say a little child's being sexually abused, extreme trauma, they're screaming or whatever, they can just black out. They go transic, right? There's a little lever in the brain, in the factory in the brain, where the workers in the brain just go, shut her down. We're going to blow a circuit totally here. Just shut the factory down. And there's safeties that God put in our brain so that when we go through high intense things walking through this world, our brain does shut down. Once it gets in the habit of doing it, though, then we begin to fear ourselves. I don't know when I'm going to have a blackout mode. Please don't make me upset. Please don't put me on a roller coaster where I'm, and I would suggest staying away from monster drinks and things that will jazz that, because that won't help you at all. You have to literally retrain the brain when it comes to blackouts. Yeah? Do you? That's high amounts of, it's not just caffeine in monster drinks. Sorry for whoever's watching online who invented all this. But there are certain chemicals in it that are highly addictive. They just haven't been outlawed. And caffeine is a drug. Nobody likes when I say that. They're like, that's just not a drug, or they wouldn't have. No, it's a drug. You can stunt the growth of a person just by, caffeine. A lot of times in poor countries, they'll have their children suck on coffee beans or something so they can get the caffeine out of it. And those people are real small, right? Because it takes their appetite away and they quit growing. I mean, it affects all kinds of different things. But we're not supposed to be putting a demand on our little adrenals like that. That's why once you hit maybe 30 years old, you get something called adrenal fatigue. A lot of people have adrenal fatigue and don't even know it, right? So they either have to pump it up with caffeine or whatever is their drug of choice in that realm. And then when they come off of it, it's always like, what's up? Some people will get narcoleptic after doing that. Like they'll be driving and they'll just pass out. We had a guy who had narcolepsy, and he would come to church, look fine, everything was great or whatever, sit in the back row there and just fall off his chair. Sound asleep, right? But he was a speed addict when he was younger. So he revved the brain up, right? And then it would just shut off. So it's similar to blackouts. So it really is a physiological thing. And I'm not trying to, cheer it on, but what I am trying to say is it is a real thing for if you were dealing somebody in relationship, you were dealing with them, and they're like, look, seriously, I don't remember. I just blacked out. And we're like, yeah. No, there's a pretty good chance they actually did. Just saying. And it's real dangerous. The subconscious then kicks in and says, I'll run this. Well, that's kind of scary because it'll keep your heart and everything moving. But the subconscious is where all your trauma memories are stored. So what are you going to do while you're blacked out? What are you doing to act out? Are you beating somebody up? Are you hurting yourself? That's the kind of stuff that happens.
Because of my trauma when I was younger,
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember my school years unless something traumatic happened, and I remember the traumatic part. But I don't remember being in school. I don't remember any of the teachers. I don't remember any of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
My whole life from before I got married is a blank, most
Mm-hmm.
of it. I don't remember, and I was never on drugs, never have done drugs. But with my sister living with me, she'll bring up something I have no idea about.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Like the day I was at your house and I blanked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if something gets triggered, then your brain will go back to that. It's a high level of dissociation, is what it is. It's your brain saying, this is way too much time, space, and energy, and it's taken up all the ports in my brain. And so the factory just says, shut it down for right now, because if I stay in this zone, I will disintegrate. Right? So that's part of that. How many have sections of your life you don't remember as a child? Yeah, for me, definitely 3rd and 4th grade, gone, baby. I remember some before that, and I remember some after that. And what I do remember, I don't like. So I really don't want to recall those middle years, because it started out and it finished in such a way that I'm like, I'm good. But at the same time, when something gets triggered, you still feel the sensation, even though there's a stopper in the brain that says, we can't bring that to the frontal lobes. The rule here is if it passes a certain part of emotion, we bring it to the frontal lobes, we don't know what's going to happen to the body. So the factory up there says, well, then don't send it to the frontal lobes. We'll just give the sensation. So you might be shaking, your legs might go numb, your hands might go numb from adrenaline or whatever. Your breathing changes. You might have a panic attack, and you're like, I don't even know what I'm freaking out about. I have no idea. That's because you got the sensation, but you didn't get the memory. That make sense? So I'm not a therapist or a counselor who's like, well, let's go dig all that up. Let's see if we can find it or whatever. No, you can go after the sensation and begin to speak to that and say, you are safe. You do not have to disappear, and breathe like you're alive. Once you start breathing from your chest like this, your brain interprets that as you're dying, because you are not getting oxygen, you're hyperventilating. So you have to breathe from your stomach. What I've done in the past when I had panic disorder, I put my hand on my stomach and make your stomach rise and fall by breathing through your nostrils. And hold it. Really hard to do when you're having a panic attack, because you're like, I can't breathe. And you make that happen. It sends the signal to the brain, no, hold on a second, we are alive. Hold. Breathe. I'm getting oxygen. I'm coming back. It's okay. And it sends those other chemicals that say, hey, maybe we don't have to shut down the factory. And the panic attack will come, but it'll leave quicker. How many of you have gotten stuck in an attack, a panic attack, or a PTSD moment, and it went on for hours? Right? I've seen people where, and I had this, where like literally you don't even know, drool's leaking down, and you're like in a fetal position, and everybody feels really far away. You can't hear them the way that you should. What? And your chest is very tight. Your palms are wet. It's all signs of trauma. And you have to figure out a way to breathe through it. I've shared this before, but just make sure it gets online again, as there's people watching here tonight that couldn't be here. If you are in a room where you're about to go to sleep, that you can test this to see if your brain's overloaded, and your room is nice and dark. How many like the nice dark rooms, except for when I stub my toe, but I kind of have my bedroom, memorized, so many feet to the bed or whatever. But then when I lay my head to the pillow and I close my eyes, it should be dark in my eyes too. When it's not dark in your eyes and you have constant flickers of light, your brain is on overload, right? That shows that there's an overload. You need to start breathing from your stomach, making that rise and fall. Releases a hormone. See how I'm even talking differently when I'm talking to you? So that there's a calming feeling. Don't be like, stop, panic attack, in the name of Jesus, stop me. Don't do that. Don't do that. It would be best if you just went, it's okay. I'm going to be all right. It takes everything you got when you're in a full-blown panic attack to do that. But it will send a message to the body, and all of a sudden all the systems will go, oh, I thought we were dying, but I guess we're not. If you go with it, your brain's convinced you're dying, and now you're in trouble. Sometimes that will pass. For some people, they have a heart attack because it keeps going, and that's the feeling you have. Many people show up in the ER thinking they're having a heart attack when they have panic disorder. And then they send you home, and the part that's so hard for the person who had the panic attack is when you're in it, It so is happening. You're like, your legs are numb, your chest is tight, your mouth is dry. You have all this stuff, and then you're like, thank you for bringing me to the hospital. Okay. And then they lay you back, and they're like, doctor will see you in a minute, and it passes. And you're like, hey, what's up? You know? And it literally will pass like that, which makes you look like you lied. You're like, no, I couldn't breathe or whatever. Then they ask you a bunch of questions, and they're either thinking you're making it up to get medication or something, and you're like, this is so dumb. But it was so real when you were in it. That makes sense? Dissociative power, like Bonnie was talking about, is to be able to disappear within yourself and not associate with what's going on, with what triggered or what's presently going on. I'm just not going to associate with that. It's dangerous, right? But to be able to stay in the real, you have to have the right information to stay in the real. Or the real will get so big, it'll eat you. And denial is, oh, none of that's going on. We just lie to ourselves. None of that's, I'm fine. Dissociation is, I know this is here, but I'm not going to associate with it. I'm going to get as far away from it as possible. And we'll disappear within ourselves. These are obstacles. Now, God shows up in the midst of all of that. We started out with the scripture, Isaiah 40, verse 3. A voice of one calling out, clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness. Remove the obstacles. Make straight and smooth in the desert a highway for our God. So the kingdom of darkness really likes to jazz us up in a way where we can't focus on any of those things. We focus on the obstacles almost like they are God. And he gets us in a frame where fear is there or whatever. We can't feel his presence. Just by taking control, take your adult self and talk to the child within you. You're okay, God's right here. And breathe. And slow everything down. But there'll be this chasing feeling that'll be like, I got to get out of here. I got to go get something. I'm going to call my dealer. I got to get some pot. I mean, it'll just give that feeling. You'll start pacing and you feel like you can't breathe. And people are like, you just want to use. No, you're having a panic attack. We sort of need to understand that, don't we? When that's happening to people. One last question, if there is one. I like open forums. All right. Well, yeah, go for it.
By the way, a lot of stuff that you talk about is really helpful, I think.
Good.
Everybody, whether they have a question or not. But I think for me personally right now, it's like I'm the worst at eating crow. I'll read something, get really on fire about it, share with everyone, convince everyone, yeah, this is what it is, this is what you ought to do, and then I'm always tested in the very area I think that is my strength.
Yeah.
And so having that center that you're talking about is really important. It's something that I'm practicing on. But my question to you personally is how do you stay? You talked about being self-aware. How would you explain personally from your own experience? How do you stay self-aware without getting into a mindset of works?
Yeah. Yeah, I worked for a few years on really understanding what performance is. Like if I'm going to be self-aware, then how do I know if I'm performing right now? Am I the real me right now? Or do I have my speaker voice on and my speaker stance on or whatever? Right? Are you the real you when you're working at the drive-thru at Wendy's versus how you're sitting here right now? How do you take the real you everywhere? Because there's something that demands, it's like I don't feel like I'm enough right now, I better start performing. Right? It's very hard to be self-aware then because you can't tell where the line is of the real you and the grandiose part that you're putting forward. And you're doing it to placate other people or you're doing it to meet their needs. You're not really interested in your own. So part of being healthy is being able to be established in your own emotional state first. Bible says that we're to love others, but it says as you love yourself, right? And so if I don't even know how to love myself, I really can't love you. So I have to learn to love myself. I have to figure out, well, what's the me that I'm loving? What's real? And what's real is this is what's real for me. I still have some teenage areas inside of me. I still have the capability of losing my temper. And I could just name, I'm not criticizing myself. And I'm not trying to share it in a way of, look at all the stuff I'm still dealing with. I'm just calling a spade a spade. Here's what's real. But here's what's also real. God has changed so much of where I'm at. And I am so thankful that it is He that works through me. I'm not sitting and focusing on how I'm going to perform. I want Him to shine His light through me, which means I better understand how He does that. What's His character like? What would it look like to be acting like Jesus? I'm not trying to act like Him. I want Him to do it through me. It's very super on the natural when that happens. But I think that was a big area where it was, I got born again, and the first thing I did was look around the church to see how they dressed. I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. Because I'm going to be a Christian now, so I got to dress like you, and I got to dress. I'm a moody dresser. I might come out in my chaps for, I don't know, go out to changing gates and cowgirl boots and you don't see me like that. I'm not changing my personality. That's just the way I felt, and I like it. And I might put my motorcycle stuff on and go for a ride or whatever. I can be allowed to touch all those areas and still be me. But it's when you take that on and you become that thing. Do you really know you? Have you found out who you are? Now, the other area that's real big in me finding out who I am is when I'm on my knees praying to God. And I just wait. And He shows me my weaknesses in such a loving way. But He also shows me the strengths of things that He's done inside of me. And it's so refreshing to take that on and have that as a part. Then there's something to that too, where you're not becoming grandiose and you're not looking at yourself through the loser lens. So you ever have that day where you're off and you just talk trash about yourself? Right? It's totally performance. I never do anything. It's so stupid and blah, 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 blah. And some people take their last name like Peltz. You don't even know what you're doing. And like you're going to discipline you somehow. You're just talking to the air, but you're, that's not a good measurement of where we're at. We're not being self-aware at that time. We're just venting. What happens to you when somebody compliments you? These are all ways of being self-aware. You're like, I don't know, I said thank you and I walked off, then I felt weird. Why? So I've done a lot of that. Not staying in my head, but more of like I'm on a journey to figure out why I do what I do. And here's my story. Here's my storyline. Oh, that makes sense as part of my story. I see that I do that because of rejection. I see that I do that. But I don't stay in that. I don't, like I'm going to just get stuck in the thought of rejection. I'm going to acknowledge it, but move on to the new thing that He has for me. What is this new thing that you have instead of rejection, God? It's acceptance. What is the new thing that you have for me instead of abandonment, Lord? I will never leave you nor forsake you. Thank you, God. See, that's when His word becomes alive and it's not religion. So I would have to say for myself, that is a big part of self-awareness. And I've grown to a point where I can talk about it to anybody, anywhere, anytime. Somebody asks me and I want to just off, and I can look at them and say I'm in a crappy mood because I'm not performing for you. Right? You are not responsible for my emotional state. Right? I'm responsible for my emotional state. And whether you like me or you don't like me, I'm responsible for how I feel and how I view life. So I'm going to need to be aware of myself. And that takes time, because if you've drugged or drank, or which is a drug, I don't know why we separate that. We're always like drugs and alcohol. Well, alcohol's a drug, So just throw them all in there. And anyway, if we're doing that type of thing, we've escaped so long that when it's gone, then we'll come back and we'll be like, so who am I? I don't know. I was so busy playing that role. Now I'm like here trying to be me, and I don't know where that started or it left off. So it's the hardest thing to find yourself in that. Where is the child within me? Where am I at? What is my most adult self? And how do I know when I'm putting too much pressure on my most adult self? So we got to navigate that. That's why there's no such thing as build a bridge and get over it. Pray about it and you'll be done. Sanctification is a process. Renewing of the mind is a process. Prayer gets you into the process and guarantees your success. But it is rare that, just go, whew, and you're like, oh, I didn't even have to grow through that. Beautiful. Hit me again, Jesus. We have to grow. We have to mature into those different things. And a big part of it is just knowing who we are. We have to learn how to be self-aware. So what are you feeling in this moment? Has any anxiety been triggered? You have to be able to check your body and be aware of that. I don't let my body run me most of the time. I can't say I do that 100%, but my body goes with me wherever I go. That's a flip too. Because if it's always, I don't know, my body feels this, so I can't go to work today. No, actually, my body goes with where the spirit living in it says to go. I say we're going to work. Yeah, but my back hurts. Get over it. And I go. You know what I mean? There's something to flipping it so you're not being controlled by your body or your emotions. You take and consider your body and emotions, but you don't let it control you. You go by the Spirit first. Spirit trumps it all, right? We are spiritual, mental, emotional, physical beings. So, and they all have to be healthy, but the Spirit trumps it all. And so you get with God, He'll tell you what to do, and then you go do that thing. Everything else has to follow. And what it does, you'll get stretch marks over that. It'll make you grow. You'll be like, you're feeling it. It's stretching you. And once you grow into a spot, you're there. It's really hard to regress to something you've truly grown into. It'd be like telling your kids, you're now in a size 8 shoe, but we're going to have you go back to a 7. Too late. They're in an 8. This is not going to happen. You know what I mean? You've already grown into that. That's where you're at. And so that's the power of growth. Even if you try to act like you're a size 7, you're still in an 8. And it'll pull you right back to that spot. Let's stand. Father, we thank you for all that you are doing in each one of our lives. There's so much trauma represented here. And we don't glorify sin in that, but we do acknowledge, we participated in, and it nailed us, especially when we were little kids. And so that's what salvation power is for, to get the load of that off of us. And so we receive that right now in the mighty name of Jesus. We receive that in Jesus' name. Move on us, change us, rearrange us. Amen. Amen. Remember, Calvin Woods will be at Friday Night Freedom on Friday at Word of Life. And the painting class is coming up, if you're interested in that, on Friday and Saturday. And the next, I think it's the following weekend. So, did you have something? You were just looking.